Hello and welcome. Well, did you know that over 90% of a child's brain develops by age 5? Incredibly, it doubles in size in the first year and it keeps growing to about 80% of an adult size by age 3, and then 90% nearly fully grown by age 5. Now, while the field of neuroscience is growing rapidly, we already have a lot of great information that can help us understand our children's early brain development. Now, today, to help share expert tips to help you support your baby's development, we welcome our special guest, Simone Myskiw Curriculum Mentor at Guardian Childcare and Education. And Simone is going to explain how babies learn from birth with expert tips and how-to tips and how to help new parents to be confident with the quality of interactions with their baby to help them grow and flourish during these critical and formative years. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, this is really exciting. There's so much to learn and it's intriguing all at the same time. And of course, caring for infants and young children is a really cherished interaction that holds a great deal of responsibility. And undoubtedly, it's one of the most remarkable and significant roles that anyone can ever have, don't you think?
Totally agree. I've always been a fan of babies. They're the most amazing, capable, funny, caring of all of us. They're natural researchers. They're so inquisitive and curious and so open to learn and to build relationships. Throughout my career, I've always been fascinated by how they work and interpret the world and build communities with each other and become social beings. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be a part of a baby's life as that kind of external person that is introduced into their community in the childcare centre. After having my own baby, I became even more interested and even more of a fan of babies and kind of learned how to layer on a new way of thinking about babies, talking about babies, and even being with babies and understanding their life. You know, sometimes in a centre or in a classroom for babies, we experience a very small portion of that baby's life. So to be able to build relationships with families that can extend out of the centre hours and learn about families and really create, you know, passionate and reciprocal relationships with families, it just has such an amazing impact on the life of babies and how they learn.
Yeah. And as you just said, babies are naturally curious, inquisitive, and fascinated with the world around them. And it really is fascinating to understand how they learn from birth, which of course is what we're here to discuss today. And as many people would have heard the phrase that parents are a child's first teacher, but like from this aspect, it's not to put too much pressure on parents from any stretch of the imagination, you know, but I'd love to understand, like from a childcare perspective and an early education and care perspective, can parents receive support and direction from their chosen childcare, as long as the childcare is providing strong contemporary pedagogy, just to help encourage interactions at home and to help family develop skills as a children's first teacher?
So the more exposure young babies and children can have to the outside world and to communities, and I suppose to the unpredictable that happens when you go out together, the more resilient they will be because they've seen more and experienced more. And babies are always watching their family members. You know, they're really keen observers. They're researching us, our every move and our every interaction. So for babies to see family members and familiar adults and even older children in their family out in the world, experiencing the unpredictable, looking at their reactions, and it's kind of like that social cue, you know, it starts raining when we're out and what does this adult do and how do I now engage with that experience? And I suppose as an adult with that baby, it's really important to, you know, talk about what's happening. And really when you're talking to babies, that really great mixture of normal adult conversations to be held around babies, to hear that range of vocabulary and tone and pace, and understand there are multiple ways to communicate, but also layering in that, that beautiful baby talk that babies really engage with, and mimicking babies babbling. And if a baby's pointing at something out in the environment, out in the world, get down to their level and point at it too. Like, show that you're interested and you're engaged in what this baby is picking up and interpreting and understanding about the world.
And do you think this is why it's so important to have a strong network around you and the baby as well, to help with these like sort of formative and sort of early interactions with a baby?
Absolutely. I mean, that old saying, it takes a village to raise a child is so important. And I think for a lot of families that I've worked with over the years, we're constantly reinterpreting what that village looks like. A lot of families are living, not near aunties and uncles and relatives and grandparents, especially inner city living. I found a lot of families are kind of by themselves, and they're trying to create these communities around them as they grow, and engaging as many people in that community as you can to support. Maybe it looks a little bit different at the moment, so it's not so much about my baby spending large amounts of time away from me with other people, but it's, going into a shop and, introducing your child by name to people that you're meeting. So instead of, talking to the community and teaching how to interact and how to, I suppose, love your community that you're in. And if we're a part of it, we respect it, then we love it, and we want to make it a beautiful place for everyone to be.
Great advice.
I just think it's really important to include children in the conversation. Like, if they're there, make them present, make them visible, make them a part of the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to acknowledge we published your article, and the title is "Did You Know Babies Learn from Birth?" Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please tell us what it's about and what inspired you to write it?
So the article is really talking about, first of all, recognising that the family is the first teacher for babies, and other children. The family are first teachers as well, and that babies are watching us and researching us all the time. And what can you do in the home that can broaden learning experiences for babies?
Fantastic.
And I suppose identifying and understanding how learning is occurring every day. Sometimes with older children, we can see learning, it becomes visible. They're telling us what they're interested in. They're saying, read a book with us, and they're taking the story in a different direction. You're seeing the play. But I suppose sometimes for new families that I've worked with, for them identifying what play and learning is for a baby is sometimes a bit harder to understand, because we don't remember being babies, so we don't have the context to jump back into. So it's really about taking those moments in the home, bathing the baby and, touching their whole body and talking about how long they are and how big they are, and using items in the home to work with babies. I suppose understanding how babies work and learn and figure out about the world together.
Okay, cool. Now, in the article, you mentioned the first 1,000 days of life. So what are the first 1,000 days of life, and why they're so important in a child's development?
So the first 1,000 days of life is roughly from birth to 2 years old. And in that space and in that time, we'll probably never learn as much as we do between birth and 2 in our life again.
It's incredible to think, isn't it?
To think that in 2 years' time, you can go from not even lifting up your head to walking and talking and running and asking questions and climbing and experiencing the full range of emotions that comes out in that first 1,000 days, and interpreting that and learning about that. In terms of building relationships and the experiences that we offer children in those first 1,000 days, the richer the experience that we can offer, the more time we invest in that experience, talking, going out together, interpreting the world, discovering, being down on the floor with your toddler and your baby, even just looking at your house or your local park from their perspective, really understanding what the world looks like for them, and working with them will really support to build the foundations and the architecture in the brain that creates this really strong foundation for, I'm a learner, it's okay to take risks, it's okay to experiment, it's okay to ask questions. And I think, as you reach the end of that 1,000 days for 2-year-olds, it's okay to have emotions and to not understand what's going on, because adults are a bit more
terrible twos that we hear about.
Yes.
Of course.
Well, I don't know about terrible twos. I do love 2-year-olds. I think they're pretty fascinating. Terrific twos. But, it's about spending that time creating really solid bases where you can feel safe to experiment and explore and find out who you are, because I suppose that's the really big part of that learning that comes from 2 to 5 is, who am I and how do I fit in the world, and why am I important, why am I different, what do I have to say, and where's my space to say it.
So the first 1,000 days is a span of time roughly between conception and a child's second birthday, and it's a window of unique opportunity when the developing child's, as I guess, optimal health and growth and learning pathways are established, would you say?
Yes, and I think it's also really important that in that time, family routines and rituals are established. So that's part of culture building. Often, broadly, culture has its own connotations and context, but there's also culture that's built within the home. So what's the culture of your home? And that's a really important way to build those really strong, healthy relationships with food, with sleep, with other adults, with other children, with the unpredictable, that can kind of come and upset babies. And
so how can improving this critical time frame provide the best long-term outcomes for children then, would you say?
I think it's being with babies, really observing
Being
what
present.
they're doing, being present, thinking about what they're doing, and I suppose being really meaningful in your interactions and really authentic in that discovery alongside babies.
Mm-hmm. And from your perspective, why do you think it's so important to send your baby and toddler to childcare then during this critical sort of time in their lives?
I think really, learning outside the home is really important. It can be quite predictable at home. You've built these routines, you've established rituals, it's predictable, it's, this is my safe space. And it's really important to get out into the community and learn outside the home, learn how the world works, learn that there are different languages, there are different ways of communicating, there are different challenges that come up in your day. When we broaden our community for babies and offer alternative perspectives for knowing and being in the world, we can offer different ways to problem solve, to communicate, to learn how to be in a community and that community responsibility, and how to build relationships, which is so important for later on in life. If you know how to build a relationship when you're young, you know how to make a friend one time, you know how to make a friend 100 times.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back, I think, initially to what you're saying about it takes a village to raise a child, but our villages have become smaller because we live, our lives are just different these days. And also, exactly what you were just saying, children must not spend their important infant and early childhood years just practicing to be school children. It's really interesting that these formative years are really about building the social interactions, because, they will miss out on, the critical 2 and 3 and 4-year-old work that provides a building blocks for later on and later learning, which is all about relationships, isn't it? Really?
Exactly. And if we look to some early childhood theory that I know a lot of educators practice, it's the hierarchy of needs. So, you need to go through,
yes,
my needs met. Do I feel safe, secure and supported?
yes.
Now can I experiment? Now can I safely take risks? And you move all the way through to self-actualization, which is that I know who I am and I know where I stand and I know what I can do and I'm feeling really confident. person. And that's in that self-actualization, that's when you can start to really build identity and understand community and really learn, like, those needs aren't being met down the bottom of the hierarchy, then it's hard to get to that self-actualization. You just kind of go up and down between those needs before you get to that real place of joy and learning and opening up
Yeah.
the
And
world.
programs for infants and toddlers are informed by, a number of evidence-based, like contemporary approaches. Some parents may have heard of one of the approaches being the Reggio Emilia approach, just being one, along with other teaching styles, including and play-based learning, being and basing, of course, on the national curriculum and early years framework. Things, for example, like Montessori and blah blah blah. There's a whole heap of them. So these are the types of things, as you were just mentioning, that provide evidence-based information to be able to help develop our babies' brains and their learning and development. But I'd love to know from your perspective, how can parents best evaluate, I guess, the efficiency of a preschool or a kindergarten curriculum when deciding which childcare to take their children to? Where do they start?
That's a really complex question.
Sorry.
And that's okay.
But I'm sure a lot of parents would want to know, because how do you know which ones
Yeah.
are, and it is a very a diverse sort of industry to be in. Overall, I know that there's about 12 sort of large players throughout Australia, and the industry becomes quite fragmented underneath that, with a lot of sort of smaller organisations. But with that, how do parents know who is the best provider for their children?
So it's really personal decision, I think, of where you would like to go, because it is an investment, especially if you're starting your baby in a centre and you're kind of planting roots in a community. You want to know that you can stay in the one place and really have that growth and take that tribe or that village of educators in the centre along with you to that kinder and school journey.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for families to, first of all, really understand what their values are, what they value for early childhood education, and what they are hoping to achieve with their child in the kinder program. So do I value friendship? Do I value community spirit? Do I value sustainability? Do I value risk-taking? Is literacy and numeracy a really important part of a kinder program for me? And then going into the centre and asking those types of questions. So how do you support children to take risks? How do you support children to build identity? My child is really interested in, literacy and counting footy scores, and how will you kind of introduce that into your program and support my child through, literacy and numeracy and identity and social emotional well-being through the lens of my family and my community and what I value.
There's some great questions.
Yeah, and it's also really important to, really frame for yourself, what does a start to school look like for me and my family. In all centres, especially in our Guardian group, we're thinking about that from babies. So how are we setting up babies for success right from the start? And that comes from, predictable routines, predictable rituals that happen throughout the centre, communication between groups when children are moving on up from a baby to a toddler group to a kinder group.
Yep.
We're sharing that information, that we have this wealth of information to share. Yep. and set children up for that final year of kinder before they head off to school. But I think when families are making those decisions, it's ask to chat with the kinder teacher, talk to the teacher about the program and what projects are happening and how that learning is being demonstrated through projects, and look for that thing that kind of pulls on your heartstring and goes, I just really love that interaction that I saw. My child would really love to be sitting with someone one-on-one reading a book, or out in the backyard, or going on an excursion, or doing some risky play. You just really kind of understand the approach of the individual teacher and the context of that community.
And how would you describe, I guess, then what the long-term benefits of sending your baby to a childcare with a preschool program then?
Well, I suppose I can talk to my own experience of being a parent. So
perfect.
My little boy started care when he was 10 months old, and he's been in the same centre and he's now 4.5. He knows that community so well, and they know him. So they can predict throughout his day when he needs some support to, kind of bring that energy in and find something constructive to do and focus on some literacy or some writing. It's predictable for him, so he can come in every day with confidence and know that this community understands him and will support him, and he's safe and secure there. And I suppose he can kind of predict the day as well, and he knows what the outcomes and the expectations are.
Yes.
So he feels safe to take risks. He feels safe to ask questions. He feels safe to be emotional and to explore who he is and to take on different personalities. And the team have seen him grow from a baby into this 4.5-year-old. So they know his history. They know it almost as well as I do. And it's really comforting for me to kind of know I can call up and say, it really is trust. I can come in and say, this is happening in our life. How can you support him? And they can kind of go, oh, well, in the past when he's been upset or over energetic or something, we've done this strategy and that's really supported him and helped him. I think it just brings up that trust and that history, and they're my village.
I was just about to say that you took the words out of my mouth. You just expanded my thoughts. Now, in your article, you list 5 key ways in which babies can learn from birth and suggested ways families can encourage this. Now, I'd love to go through them with you now, starting with learning through the senses. How do babies learn through their senses?
So babies, and I like to use this term, I'm not sure it's a technical term, but they have these haptic relationships. So haptic is kind of researching through touch and experimenting. And I just feel like babies, in my observations, have a haptic relationship with the world. Everything has to be touched and felt, and I want to touch it with my feet and my hands and my mouth, and I want to hear it and smell it. So that sensory learning for babies is really, really important. But I suppose to broaden thinking, a bath is a sensory experience. Eating food is a sensory experience. Throwing things off the high chair is a sensory experience. So I think to come back to something I said earlier, the broader and the richer the experience we can offer, the deeper the learning becomes and the better the experience becomes.
So what can parents do at home to help their babies to develop their senses through, different environments and, I guess, open-ended materials then?
Being out in the world is a really great way to experience a sensory kind of overload, I suppose. Taking a baby out on a windy day is just something really magical. It's unpredictable. There's wind blowing, hairs blowing, leaves are blowing around. It can be a really amazing experience to be, out in all different types of weather and experience the world in all its different kind of ways. But it's also layering language onto that. So, if you're out in the wind, my hair's lifting up, and using those really descriptive and emotive words to talk about what's happening, to link, the feeling to a word, which is going to increase emotional and social vocabulary in young children, and which also, if you have a richer social emotional vocabulary, it's easier for you to communicate how you're feeling because you have a broader bank of words to kind of pull from.
Yes.
So it's really important that you're layering, especially with babies, layering real words onto that kind of baby talk and that babble that you're doing along with your child while having sensory experiences. One thing that...
Oh, sorry, continue. Sorry. Yeah, continue.
I always remember, it's really easy to do sensory experiences with babies because they're so reactive to it and they have so much joy for it, and you start to engage in this relationship. If I'm smiling and you're smiling and we're having a great time, we want to talk more and make this relationship last longer. So, it's just sometimes that prolonged or sustained. So if you have a scarf and you're waving it around and baby's really, really enjoying that, like keep going, like enjoy the moment and really be in the moment.
And I just mentioned about open-ended play experiences, but how would you describe what an open-ended play experience is for a baby? We speak about this quite a lot as the children grow through the toddler and early sort of preschool sort of phase of their life. But what would it be, and how would you describe what that is for a baby?
So an open-ended material, and we talk about this a lot in early childhood settings, that we have these open-ended materials and play-based learning and open-ended play. It really is about providing materials that I suppose in some ways are neutral to a certain play space. So how can a bucket of gum nuts and leaves be used to tell stories, to build, to create an environment? And also for a sensory experience, that's a really unpredictable kind of feeling, because we can't dictate what a gum nut should feel like, because everyone will feel different. So it's about providing resources that, I suppose, it's a tricky one to explain.
I mean, then how would you
have a specific purpose?
And how would you how would parents support a child during an open-ended play experience then?
Well, I think the classic one that probably most families experience is baby raiding the cupboards. Opening the cupboard doors and cupboard drawers and really wanting to pull everything out and experiment. To seize that moment and jump in on that moment with children, or provide a cupboard that has lots of containers with mismatched lids and little things they can put into the containers and shake around and move and experiment with. So the Tupperware drawer is a great place for babies to play, because it's mismatched and some do match, and there's little pieces and big pieces, and you might find baby is drumming on it one day and the next day building and knocking over, and the next day storing things in containers or hiding things away.
Yes.
They just want to completely rearrange the drawer. Great example of an open-ended resource at home, because it's unpredictable. We're not sitting down and going, you have to start here and finish here with this. It's open. You can explore where you want to go, and we don't know what the baby will do, and that's a really exciting part of open play.
And thank you for that. And another thing as well, which everybody loves, is bubbles. I'd love to know from your perspective, how can bubbles help support babies' healthy cognitive, physical, and just even sort of vocab sort of development overall?
Well, I think all of us have witnessed children playing with bubbles, and just the joy on children's faces when they're playing with bubbles. And to that comment, when children are happy and they're laughing and they're engaged, they're learning about the world. So it's a really great time to start to use vocabulary, like, there's popping, it's floating, it's how's it coming down, gravity, popping, sounds that the bubbles make. It's also about that bubbles are unpredictable.
Yes.
They're not the same shape and the same size every time. So it's, it supports that very early on, that precursor to, theory making. Why aren't the bubbles all the same? Why don't they move the same?
Yeah.
And we see responding that, they'll watch for a couple of minutes and then realize, if one bubble goes that way, they're all going to go that way, but next time they all might go that way. So it's that ability to think and make a theory and then test that theory out.
As well.
I've done for really young babies. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've done a bit of research myself, but you can continue on. Go.
There's also for young babies, it helps with kind of tracking, so they're
visual tracking,
an unpredictable movement in the environment, and the way bubbles move, they come in and out of focus. So it's also engaging kind of cognitive work with eyes and brain development.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You know, babies, bubbles are so beneficial for babies' cognitive development, as you just said. And some of the examples I've sort of just researched is the visual tracking, which you just mentioned. So a newborn baby will be able to see and watch bubbles from about 3 months of age, and from this point, their nearsighted vision has developed enough for babies to be able to see the color and the contrast of the bubbles. And watching the bubbles move provides babies with the opportunity to strengthen their eye muscles. So visually
Mm.
tracking, which you just mentioned, the motion of the bubbles can help them to develop focus and spatial awareness and sense of direction. Also, as babies observe the bubbles rise and float through the air, they can help just babies learn about their environment. And this can demonstrate that some objects are heavy and others are lightweight and they float, which you just mentioned. And of also the difference between speed, I think, as well, with slow and fast moving bubbles and the change of direction, all of these things that they're sort of taking in for their cognitive development. And bubbles can also assist babies, I guess, in developing I guess just comprehension of shape, form, and texture, which I think you just mentioned earlier as well. But muscle strengthening, especially during tummy time, is a great thing for bubbles. As a as a baby sort of lay on their tummies, as we know, the bubbles can help promote, I guess, a movement that will help sort of develop their muscle tone and development as they lift their heads high and turn both ways. This can assist with making, I guess, initial forward moving movements a little bit easier as they maybe want to sort of go ahead and sort of catch and or pop the bubbles, and to pull their
Yeah.
bodies forward as well. As babies, I guess, continue to grow and start to crawl and chasing the bubbles, this can help to progress all forms, their physical strength and development in coordination and just self-confidence, which of course, as we know, is going to assist the child later on in life with physical activities such as walking and running, climbing, jumping, swimming, and all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts are on that. And
Yeah, I think definitely, like I said before, bubbles for some magical reason bring a lot of joy to children's lives, and I suppose because they are unpredictable and they're joyful, beautiful, shiny things that children engage with. But when children are really in a joyful kind of joy and laughter shows that a baby is engaged. So with the bubbles being in a baby's space on tummy time, it does promote that forward movement to go, I'm joyful, I'm learning, I'm really loving this. Maybe I'll push myself a little bit further. Maybe I'll discover something new if I reach out, or I want to
yes,
grab that bubble, and for the first time I was able to lift my shoulder when I was on tummy time. Oh, that's interesting. I'll try that again, and I'll try that again. So when learning is joyful, it's richer.
yes.
And children are encouraged to take risks and try new things.
And also just helping develop their gross motor skills and hand-to-eye coordination, as you just said, with reaching forward and trying to pop them, and hide eye coordination and sensory experiences and body awareness as well, I think, overall.
Yeah, and that depth perception of reaching into something or reaching up, and how far does this go ahead of me, and there's more. There's always more
Yeah.
to do.
Now, the next thing in the article is learn through relationships. I mean, how do babies learn through the secure and trusted relationships with their parents, friends, family, and everyone that's close to them?
So babies are very, very social beings. They love to be a part of a community. I think for in an early childhood setting, it's really about knowing this baby as an individual, knowing their culture, knowing what they are comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with, and then really jumping into that space with them. So for example, meal times, in the home, baby might eat at 5 o'clock and then go to bed at 6 o'clock and not see the adults eating in the family. Maybe baby's part of a really busy, loud family and they all sit at the table together and all eat together, and it's a noisy, really social experience. When they come into our settings, it's really important to know that kind of information, because otherwise we're just making an assumption that all children like to sit at the table and eat together. That could
Yes.
be a really confronting experience for a baby. So, knowing that information about families and children and their culture and their context, I would be taking that moment to go, you really need a nice, quiet one-on-one mealtime. I'm going to provide that for you. And in that one-on-one interaction, that's when we're building relationships. It's saying, I know what you need, you can trust me, come to me when you need me, I'm a safe, secure person, I'll support you to be here.
Yeah. So
across the day and across the week and across all the educators that come into that child's life, knowing this type of information, you can kind of choose the best people to be in certain scenarios with children to build that relationship. So this baby might like to have lunch with me, but might like to sleep with somebody else. So it's about building that community and going, we all have relationships, and here are very many ways for you to have relationships within this group.
And so, babies learn to socialize and communicate with things like eye contact, stretching out their arms to be picked up, and actively, I guess, seeking with family members, friends, which all pointers which signify your child is learning through their relationships, would you say?
Absolutely. And every child's on a different journey in building those relationships. Some children, as soon as they meet anybody in the street, it's a big smiling face and they're waving and reaching out and touching, and some children like to observe the world first and then kind of jump in when they're ready. To build relationships with children, the first relationship that has to happen is with the family. So if babies can see an educator or a teacher and a family member having a really positive interaction and including baby in that conversation, so a parent might be holding the baby and another adult can be touching the baby as the parent is holding them and talking to them and using their name and eye contact and pointing around the room and engaging with them as they are a really valid member of that conversation. First indication to a baby that this is someone my family trusts, so I can trust them as well.
And talking about relationships, I guess one of the most important relationships is with themselves also. So how can parents help their baby to identify just their sense of self?
I suppose identifying sense of self really comes into who is my family and who am I in this family? What role do I kind of play? Self-identity is, again, we were talking earlier about those building blocks and that architecture. It's done in such little incremental ways throughout those first 1,000 days and building up into all of our whole adult life, really. We're always re-identifying and reimagining who we are. For babies and young toddlers, it's about using their name, asking for their idea and their opinion, asking them to participate in rituals, setting up the table in an early childhood setting, putting a vase of flowers out, who needs to collect the lunch trolley, who's the person who likes to give out the bowls to everybody and invite their friends to the table, and taking those moments when you're really seeing children shining out who they are or engaging in a ritual or creating a ritual with you and pulling on that thread and going, this is who you are, what you're good at, let's explore that further.
And for a baby, it's about sort of developing, as you just said, what their own name through active listening, and smiling when being spoken to, and even smiling when they're looking at themselves in the mirror. That sort of stuff can, I guess, can sort of help quite a lot for a baby. Now, the next thing on the list is learning through communication. So how can parents help their babies to develop their communication skills? I'd love to learn and hear about this one.
I think it's definitely that the more exposure to language and conversation that a baby and a young child can have, the richer their own understanding will be. So, it's about all different types of conversation and layering different types of conversation and through songs, through books, through rhymes, through, when I'm walking quickly and being busy, I'm using a busy voice. And when it's time to settle and calm, I'm using a calmer voice. And we're engaging in a relationship of communication all the time. I think it's so important to include babies in a conversation. So,
very important.
If a child's sitting on your lap and you're talking to another adult, bring them into the conversation,
Yes.
acknowledging them, and that what you were saying before, the eye contact, saying their name, and I suppose just being invested in their world and understanding how individuals communicate. So
Yeah.
some babies will be very verbal from the onset of life, and they love to really tell you what's happening in their life and always drawing your attention. Some babies, are that quiet observer, and they're pointing out differences and things in the world in a different way. So
Yeah.
understanding what your baby's body language is as well. I suppose we call them cues. So what are the cues for sleep, and the cues for eating, and the cues for I'm bored or I'm overwhelmed? What are those cues? And when you see that cue, if it's a sleep cue of rubbing their eyes, or they rub their hands together or grab a certain toy, talking about what they're doing in that time and describing what they're doing and what will come next
Yeah.
will help them to learn to communicate that need in the future.
And would you say playing games like peekaboo, which we all love, and making funny faces and sounds, which you see all parents that are doing, encouraging babies, to imitate, speech sounds, and mouth moving, and taking turns of conversations, as you just said before, can help, I guess, promote academic, social, and that emotional growth.
And I think it's really important and fun to mimic what babies are telling you. So you mimic their face that they're pulling.
Yes.
And talk to them about, oh, you just did this face, and pull that face as well, or mimic their body language, and to really kind of develop a language that is just between baby and family, or baby and primary carer, or important people in the community. Imitating what babies are doing and the sounds they make and the faces they pull and the actions that they're doing. I mean, it's gorgeous, but it also tells baby that I hear you, I see you, and I understand that you're trying to communicate with me.
Yeah.
And to teach that there are so many layers to communication. It's not just words.
Yeah, babies do use their facial expressions and verbalizations to share their thoughts and feelings, don't they? So communication can help sort of, I guess, foster those early relationships. And I guess doing those things are always a great start. Now, the next thing we've got on the list is learning through trying. How can parents help their babies to develop, dispositions such as problem solving and resilience?
Again, I think this is a really personal kind of conversation that each family would probably have. We bring many contexts and many conversations to the table with this. What I'm comfortable with in terms of, taking risk and trying, and, is probably different to what my friend might want to do. So, if you're in a safe space, a familiar garden or a familiar park, anchor yourself in a certain space. Here's our blanket and here's our things that we're all familiar with. But kind of let baby crawl off maybe a little bit further than maybe you're comfortable with. And, be talking like, oh, I can see you're a long way away. It might take you a while to come back to me, and I'm here when you're ready, and listen out for my voice. So, it's that first kind of test of letting the tether out a little bit, and seeing how far baby will go and what risk they're willing to take when they're away from you. Open-ended materials are really, and resources are really great for this type of trial and error and problem solving and trying, because we don't always know how they work. Building with containers, for example, out of the Tupperware drawer, it's unpredictable. They're different weights, they're different sizes, they're different shapes, they're going to fall apart in the tower, and you've got to build it back up again. And, trying to make a space where it's okay to not succeed the first time at doing something. So building a tower for the first time, it might take 20 goes, and just to be there and be a part of that relationship and that learning together, being engaged in the unpredictable. Where can we go where we don't know what's going to happen? It might be about to rain, or it might be about to get very windy, or we'll go to a cafe and we're going to talk to a stranger, or try new food. It's just about that, creating a safe space to experiment and try, and to show baby that you're right there alongside them, learning, pretending, playing, being tricky together, and really experimenting and learning together.
Wonderful. All great advice. We've covered a lot in our chat today, Simone. If you were, I guess, to summarize your key messages for anyone watching and listening, what would they be?
The key message really is, you know, there are communities of people out there waiting to meet you and your baby, and you know, early childhood settings, some really amazing and magical things that can happen with relationships and community building, and creating that village. You know, we want to know you and we want to know your baby. We're here as part of your family, and we want to go on that journey with you, and know you and what your challenges are, and what are your hopes and dreams for your child, and how we can help you to kind of achieve those dreams. And you know, there's such richness in exploring new communities and getting to know new people. And also for babies to see other babies is just really important part of early childhood development.
Definitely.
And understanding community. But also we learn best from our peers. So for other babies to see how other babies react to certain situations and to the unpredictable, and oh, that baby's sitting up and eating his food, that's really interesting, I haven't tried that before. Or to see the younger children, to see older children doing complex things like climbing and running and jumping and talking or reading books or singing songs. You know, it really encourages young babies and toddlers to go, oh, I have a goal to work towards. I can see the future. It's right there in front of me. How I'm now encouraged to go and do that and explore. And
yeah, this is wonderful. If parents have got any other questions and or want to find out more information from you guys, whereabouts can they find you?
If you want to know more about any of our centres, please jump onto the Guardian website, and you can see what centres are close to you. The web pages will have some beautiful photos of the centres, and a message from the centre manager that really talks about what's special about that particular community, and what important things are valued there. And book a tour and jump in and meet some of our team members and see the other babies, and you know, start to understand what we do and why we do it. And can't wait to hear from you.
Oh, look, thanks so much for your time today. I really love this conversation, and much love to all the team and everyone at Guardian as well. So stay safe, and hope to have the opportunity to speak with you guys again in the not too distant future. But until then, take care, stay safe. Thanks.
You
Take
too.
care.
My pleasure.
All right, bye.